every single individual case is what really is a milestone for me, just to see that miracle happen.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella-Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella-Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella-Williamson. This season, our focus is on milestone moments. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Joe Nespral and Casey Casseb. Joe Nespral, MD, CPTC, is the president and CEO of Texas Organ Sharing Alliance. Joe has been with TOSA since July 1997 and was promoted to CEO in October 2016. Joe has an extensive background in Organ Procurement Organization leadership in operations, restructuring, policy analysis, business development, and quality improvement. Casey Casseb has been creating and executing creative marketing, media, and events for unique brands for over 20 years. She has experience collaborating with Fortune 500 brands and is a strong advocate for personalized, committed, and exceptional service to all clients, both internal and external. Currently, she serves as the Texas Organ Sharing Alliance Director of Communications. Welcome, Joe and Casey.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, well, we're super excited to get into this conversation with you all. So, Joe, Casey, tell us more about your backgrounds and your work at TOSA today. Joe, we can start with you.
So I've been with TOSA now for 28 years, and my background is I'm a physician by education, and I do not practice medicine per se. I'm currently the CEO of the Texas Organ Sharing Alliance, which is the organ procurement organization that represents the Central and South Texas region.
Wonderful. Casey, tell us a little bit about what you're working on these days. What's your background? What do you do at TOSA?
Yeah, so I'm currently the Director of Communications at TOSA. But my background is rooted in communications and storytelling, but I've worked in technology for the bulk of my career. I've always been drawn to roles where the communication that I'm working on can create impact. So here at TOSA, I oversee a team that manages internal and external communications, media relations, public education. It's an incredibly important and meaningful mission. So we do everything we can to get the word out there and get more people to sign up to be organ donors.
Absolutely. And my firm, MVW Communications, has been so honored to be at your side at TOSA and supporting your work for over a year now. Really learned a lot more about the process. I'm registered to be an organ donor, and I just want to champion that for others because we've seen the life-saving gifts and really the impact that's had within my family unit and, beyond. And I think that I know when we first met Casey, we were talking about your transition from tech to TOSA. And one of the comments I had for you was like, wow, what precious work you do. It's so important. It's so sensitive. It's so vital. And it's really something that you have to lead with heart, but you also have to use a great amount of care and brain for, right?
Absolutely.
Well, this season, we really want to talk about milestones because even in the toughest of times or most dynamic of times, there are opportunities that we have professionally and really in our personal lives too, where we can really kind of take the stage and bring light to something that matters. And milestones or achievements or big moments in time give us those opportunities in that natural stage as well. So I'd like to talk about milestones that you all have experienced. So tell us a little bit about a milestone moment that you have experienced yourself, or maybe something you made happen that was impactful in your career.
The need is it's such need. There's over 10,000 Texans right now waiting for an organ. Nationally, there's over 120,000. And unfortunately, anywhere between 16 to 18 people die every day waiting on the list. So it's extremely important that we create this awareness and people understand the importance of organ donation because it is saving lives. So I've been in this field for over 35 years now. And honestly, I cannot put my finger on just one thing because I think the miracle of just one organ donor that occurs, it's what really excites us, excites me anyway, to see that we work with these families through their grief and make them understand the importance, and then ultimately see the miracle of transplantation occur. And so when we see that full circle, it's just amazing to me. It never really gets old. And so that follow up with recipients and then ultimately with donor families, it's just a special moment for me. So, to say that we achieve so many cases a year and affect so many lives a year, I can throw numbers, but to me, it's every single individual case is what really is a milestone for me, just to see that miracle happen because it is a very complicated process, but it's also a very rare process. And I don't think people realize how rare it is to become an organ donor. So when that actual happens, it's very, very important.
You're right, Joe. And I remember when we were first doing our strategic communication planning with you and the team, I was really enlightened by some of that context as well. Just learning that it's, about 2% of people on the list could actually become an organ donor. It kind of has to be almost miraculous, like you said. It has to almost be in the perfect scenario because what you all focus on is some of the major organs that are transplanted that have to happen right after deceased donation. And I have found all the work very important, but super enlightening for sure. And Joe, I will say that having done this for 28 years, sometimes those milestone moments is like what even brought you to the organization, or maybe the first time you experienced that transplant. But is there anything you'd like to share about, how you even got to TOSA from your background? I thought that was really exciting when we first met and I heard that story.
So I kind of fell into this through my training, and I fell in love with the process, and I really stuck with it for so many years. But where I early on felt that I had a very important role for this process was being a Hispanic myself and being bilingual, and being able to communicate in Spanish. I found that there was a great need in the different areas that I've worked around the country where there weren't a lot of people who could communicate, particularly in Spanish, and explain the process. And so, seeing that in particular, it's gotten a lot better over the years, but seeing that there was even a greater need amongst the minority communities, and especially in the areas that I had worked around the country, seeing so many Hispanics waiting for that precious opportunity, I saw that as my opportunity to be that liaison or that conduit so that I can sit there and really explain the importance. And so I've really taken that along with me all along in my career to ensure that population that we represent is as well as educated and understands the process so that they can be as comfortable as possible with this decision.
Super, super important, Joe. And what I'm coming up with is the reality is your representation and what you do and who you can connect with on a very nuanced level is a milestone of its own. So thank you for seeing that need and really reacting in a way that's made a huge impact in society. So that's fantastic. Casey, in your point of view, milestone moments can be something that we experience or we make happen, especially as communicators. Is there something you'd like to share in that spirit?
Yeah, I mean, what you said is right on. One of the most meaningful moments in my career as a whole has happened as I transitioned from a more traditional comms role into the world of organ donation. A few months after I started at TOSA, I was at the first donor remembrance event that I'd been to, and just listening to these families share their stories of just love and legacy, and it just made me realize the immense responsibility that we carry as communicators, and it kind of reshaped how I approach storytelling and just made me want to kind of shift the tone of our work for everything from a social post to an op-ed to a billboard to just feel more purposeful. And it was definitely a professional milestone, but it was also just a very human one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we're thinking about people in such a sometimes it's a tragic situation, certainly a trying situation, all death is hard no matter what the circumstances, I think to a certain extent. And we have to approach the storytelling and the conversations around it with that people first focus, with that human focus. And I really appreciate as a professional how open you've been to really discussing that with our team and discussing that point of view of, well, okay, how do we get to people's hearts? How do we try to help them understand and bust some myths without coming off as salesy, right? I mean, there's a fine line between influence and being seen as salesy. So I think that navigating that is precious territory and it is purposeful. And I love that you've felt the meaning along the way. That's really, really exciting.
Well, you guys have been critical in helping us sort of define that tone and that approach. So we appreciate your partnership.
Ah, our honor. Absolutely. And Joe, we want to definitely highlight that you all at TOSA are celebrating a huge milestone, your 50th anniversary. So, what are some of the major achievements, changes, or just to be cute about it, right? Milestones that TOSA has experienced in 5 decades of this work?
I have not been in this field for 50 years, and I have not worked for TOSA for 50 years, but I'm getting close to that. So I've seen how things have changed dramatically over the years for the good, for the better. I would say that very early on in my career, 30, 35 years ago, transplantation was still seen as it was new, it was experimental. There wasn't a lot of awareness as compared to today, where I find it hard to believe that there's nobody that has not have heard of organ donation and transplantation, who has not known someone who either needs an organ, unfortunately did not receive an organ while waiting on the list, or will eventually need an organ transplant. So that's a big difference when we're talking to people as compared to in the past, where it was really more the educational part of it was making them understand how the process worked, where we still do that, but at least people have an understanding of the importance of seeing someone benefiting from an organ transplant. So I think that's a big change that we've seen. The other area is that really excites me is that when I was given this opportunity to become the CEO of this organization, we really grew the organization rapidly to adapt to and adjust to the needs of our community. So we really staffed up. I'll give you an example. We were probably an organization of about 75 people, and we're currently around 200 staff members. We're very excited about an area that we developed on our property, which is dedicated to donor families. It's our Wall of Heroes, and it's a beautiful testament of recognizing the value and the love of our donor families, and recognizing the donation process and recognizing the individuals that donated. So, as Casey mentioned earlier, we do an annual event, and we recognize the previous organ donors from the year, and have all the families invited. And it's just a wonderful event to have that on our property, and then have the medal of the medals posted on our Wall of Heroes and recognized. So that's just a beautiful, and just reminds everyone of the importance of what we do. And then hearing those individual stories of the donor families and then the recipients, it just brings the whole thing together, and it's just a very, very special moment. So I really focus on those things. Those are the areas that we can control. We work with our hospitals, we work with our partners to ensure that every opportunity is met, and we have an opportunity to talk to these families and explain to them the process, and work with them. And that's, to me, is these long-term relationships that we have established. Many of our donor families and recipients become volunteers for us, and they're outstanding spokespeople for us. And it's just amazing to hear their story repeat over and over again about how important the whole process was, and from both sides, from the donation side and from the recipient side. And that's just very heartwarming, and that's what keeps us going.
I love, Joe, how you're always thinking about the people and the legacy and the gifts more than, some others with your background might think more about the innovation of transplantation and the medical whatnot and the technologies, and all of that is vital and important. But I do love that what is sticky
I
for you is the heart, for sure.
Yeah, I could go on for hours talking
Yes.
about the technologies and the modernization and the improvements we've made. But at the end of the day, it's really about achieving that miracle, as I explained earlier, of seeing someone actually who's very sick, who does not have any other opportunity, where the doctors have no other choices to offer someone other than the transplant. And that's very, very scary for someone who's been told that there's no more drugs or there's no other procedures that can help you. And if you do not receive an organ, you're going to die. And that's got to be very, very scary. And then on top of that, the mental aspects of knowing that someone else has to give up their life to save your life. And that's a very interesting concept that our recipients have to go through as well. But we have seen over the years, it's very interesting how our donor families come to accept the fact that although they just went through a terrible tragedy, that in the end, because of that tragedy, somebody else will benefit from that. And it's a very unique situation that we have to experience, that we do experience, and it's a very special thing to see how that works out.
Yeah, it truly, truly is. It's one of those dual moments, right? We talk about duality sometimes in communication and our experiences, but there's a loss that leads to life, and that is a little surreal and unique to walk through, and certainly to communicate around. And so that brings me to you, Casey, because as we all are discussing, organ donation is an absolutely precious gift. I mean, there's absolutely nothing like saving someone's life. And that's both also in terms of the experience for the recipient, and often brings some purpose, healing, and that feeling of meaning and legacy to the donor families who've experienced the loss, right? But there's a growing need for people on the organ donor list, and also growing uncertainty about the messages posted online sometimes about donation. So, what are myths that are important that we address so our listeners who are professional communicators can help spread more accurate messages?
You're so right. The miscommunication and the myths are such a barrier for us, especially considering that a lot of the communities that we serve are medically underserved and so probably don't have all the facts. So probably the most common myth that we hear that people use as a reason not to sign up to be a donor is that doctors will not save your life. If you're a registered organ donor, which could not be more false, a doctor and every medical professional, first and foremost, are there to save you. They don't even know if you're an organ donor when they're working on you. So that's just patently untrue. Organ donation is only considered after you've been, declared medically deceased. So it's not something that a doctor would ever have on top of their mind while they're working on a patient. Another one that we get a lot is that, I'm too old or I'm not healthy enough to donate, which is just untrue. You don't have to be young and super healthy to donate. The doctors and medical staff will make a determination at the appropriate time to if you can donate anything. And, you might have an unhealthy lung, but you might have perfectly healthy kidneys. So it's really, we don't want people to disqualify themselves before a medical professional has even ever had the opportunity to evaluate them.
Yeah, I think those are really important points and very powerful pieces of education to give us, right? Communicators who work in different communities across the world have opportunities to change that narrative, to influence something more positive and hopeful and truthful. So I really want to share that call to action with our listeners here is that, hey, learn more, right? If you're still unsure based on this conversation, and I know everyone that is listening is probably analytical and investigative, and that is important to be, right? I always say verify, then trust. But do your research. You can get a lot of great information and facts from TOSA1.org, TOSA's website, and of course, Donate Life websites across the country have information for you. And then real life testimonies from people who have benefited from receiving organs and donor families who found so much support and healing after a loss from experiences like this. So thank you, Casey, for bringing that up. I think that's really important. And so you both now, having been with TOSA for a variety of experiences and years, have some memorable moments that have happened in your work. So I would love for Casey, can you tell us a story or experience that you've had at TOSA that you think is especially meaningful or just unforgettable?
One of the most meaningful things for me hasn't been tied to a certain instance or campaign, but it was just watching my team really come into their own. I lead a team of 5 really dynamic women who all have their own strengths, and they come from different backgrounds, and together we take on pretty big goals. As we talked about earlier, when I came into this role, we were kind of shifting our approach to communications. And there was just a point where I just felt everything click. We were so busy, just packed calendars, everything happening at once, but they just more than rose to the challenge. And I just loved watching them collaborate and help each other and support each other. And, I just kind of sit back and thought, like, this is it. This is what a high performing, value driven team looks like. And I'm just so proud of the work that they're producing, and of the kind of trust that we've built together as a team. And it sort of reminds you that we're not just about creating external wins and, as communicators, hitting our KPIs and that kind of thing, but it's really about creating that culture where people can thrive as individuals and as part of a team.
I love that. And I think a lot of us listening are going, oh yeah, the click, right? We love when the teams
Right.
connect and can start doing that deep work, that flow state work. There's nothing like feeling that for sure.
Mhm.
Joe, from your perspective, not only have you been with TOSA for almost 30 years, but you've been with them through the pandemic. And I just wondered, did that offer any kind of experiences that you're like, wow, this is something I won't forget or, will learn from?
Well, I think everyone experienced something that was new, and how everyone had to adapt to the new reality that we were experiencing. But, from my perspective, leading an organization that so many people are dependent on ensuring that we do a good job. Because if we don't do a good job, unfortunately, not enough people are going to get that opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to get a transplant. So certainly, there were delays, there were stoppages, there were concerns. Leading such a great team and being able to adapt quickly so that we would not stop the important work that we did. We had to work very closely with our hospitals, and with the transplant programs, and figure out within hours how we needed to adapt, because we could not stop. If we were to stop entirely the operation, we recognize that people would suffer. And so, um, there were slowdowns. Certainly, we had to pivot and adapt rapidly to the environment that was in the circumstances. But we were still busy throughout the whole process, throughout COVID. So I'm very proud of leading an organization, and folks that are so devoted to what we do, because I don't think that I know that the general public doesn't understand how complicated a process this is. Most people, and it's understandable, just see the TV version of what happens, right? Where a doctor on TV says so and so needs a heart, and all of a sudden someone shows up with a cooler and they transplant the heart, and it's happy ending. Well, what people don't realize is that before someone receives that heart, there could be anywhere from 3 to 6 days of work that's going on behind the scenes to ensure that someone ultimately gets that transplant. So donation is a very complex process. It's not just what we do. We have to work hand in hand with the hospitals, the donor hospitals where the patient is at. We have to work hand in hand with the transplant programs and coordinating the operations, et cetera, and the transportation of these vital organs. And so it's very, very complex. And to see this happen on a daily basis, it's really what's exciting to see the folks that we have that are just so into it and so passionate about what they do. And that's really what keeps us going on a daily basis, is knowing that there is a great need. And I'll focus a little bit on that need, because unfortunately we live in an area of Central and South Texas where there's actually a greater need, for example, for certain types of transplants, in particular kidney transplants. We live in an area where that's primarily Hispanic, and we know that Hispanics have a higher tendency to have or develop diabetes and hypertension. And unfortunately, those things over the years can have a negative effect on your kidney function, where ultimately, if you don't take care of yourself, you could lose that function of the kidneys. And so, as Casey mentioned earlier, a huge portion of the population we represent are underserved. They're medically underserved. They may not have the means to have the appropriate medical care. And so these things catch up. And so the bottom line is that when you look at our transplant wait lists, the overwhelming majority of folks waiting, particularly for a kidney, are Hispanic. And so it's so important for us to get the message out there to make sure people are taking care of themselves. But ultimately, the need is there, and we need more and more of our population to step up and participate and believe and trust the system of organ donation. Because that's really the biggest challenge that we're seeing right now is people post-COVID. We're seeing a lot of people just don't trust in general what the government is telling them. They're not trusting medicine in general, and we're part of that. We saw that with people not wanting to vaccinate their children, etc. So we're dealing with that as we speak, with trying to reestablish that what we do is trustworthy and that there is a system in place to ensure that we hear these myths and rumors, as Casey said earlier, that the staff at a hospital is not going to take care of someone, or we're going to take someone to the operating room and they're not deceased and remove those organs from them. Those are myths that still exist out there, and we have to deal with those on a daily basis. So it's so important for us to continue to educate the folks, but really trying to establish that trust is so important right now.
You're absolutely right. And I, just want to applaud the work that you all were able to achieve in a time like COVID, when it was so pressure filled, fast paced, dynamic, uncertain. And I think this whole decade, I've been saying, at least on this season of the podcast, like, I think the whole decade has offered us a lot of unexpected twists and uncertainty. And humans just don't do that well with uncertainty. We don't like it. Our brains don't like it. And therefore, we're trying to cling to something that we know is true. And I would say one of the harsh aspects that came from the pandemic is that we never imagined we'd go through something like that globally. And the unimaginable became, imaginable. And that was really rough on trust. And so our work as communicators is, again, to go back to the fundamentals and how do you build that? And that is with provable data and provable testimonies. And I think the storytelling you all are doing helps with that. And conversations like this that are a little deeper are helpful too. So thank you for that. And one of the other things I saw on COVID is I think a lot of people began to really understand the proximity of organ transplantation to them. Like when COVID was damaging lungs so badly in the first few years, that we knew people who needed lung transplants who had healthy lungs before the virus that all of a sudden that they were on the list and they had a need and they got a transplant because of COVID. So I think that the reality of your work was also made real for people. And so I hope this conversation helps, again, humanize it more and more and more as we need to do that. So thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, go
I
ahead.
will add one thing, Melissa. And I think the conversation that people need to have with their loved ones and their family members to well, first of all, people need to understand the process and be, as I said earlier, trust and be comfortable with the process. And if they do make that decision, to discuss it with their families, because at the end of the day, organ donation is just another end of life decision that people should be having with their families anyway, right? People struggle to have those discussions because they are uncomfortable. Should I be buried? Should I be cremated? Just should I have a power of attorney to make decisions for me? And these are things that are hard for people to discuss. But again, organ donation fits right into that decision making that people need to have. So that's why we encourage folks that even if you do this on your own, let's just say you go to the driver's license bureau and you sign up to be an organ donor, or you go online and sign up on the registry, it's still important to discuss it with your family because we want them to be comfortable as well with your decision. And that's it just makes the whole process go smoother. And again, we feel that this is where the challenge is on a daily basis for us, is having these discussions because people have not had this previous discussion with the family. And again, I can't emphasize how important that is.
That's a very, very important point, Joe, because we do need to normalize this kind of conversation, this proactive kind of conversation, because it's really hard. I know within the family circles I'm in, right? It's people want to know what you would want. And if we don't have that chance to discuss it, it's even harder, the process of grief after. So thank you so much for bringing that up because that's another helpful point. And Casey, as we're talking about, even just here, right, the communication around this topic, around these topics is complex. Your work to educate the public on such a vital, precious, and sensitive topic is essential, but certainly challenging.
Mhm.
So, what insights can you share from that viewpoint?
Yeah, like y'all have both mentioned, it's not something people really want to talk about. So in the 2 years that I've been with TOSA, what I've learned is that you really just have to meet people where they are emotionally and culturally and even digitally, right? Depending on what they have access to. So with a topic like this, your timing and your tone are critical. We try to approach communication with just a lot of respect and a lot of humility and just listen, listen, listen. It's also vital that we create great partnerships with our hospitals, our faith communities and schools and all our media outlets because they multiply our reach and they multiply our impact. And that helps really, get the message to people in multiple avenues so they start to feel more comfortable with the topic.
Absolutely. Timing, tone, super vital. And like you said, tailoring for the different audiences, the different stakeholders, right? How you may speak about this subject to a hospital partner should be and will be very different to just a general community member who may walk up to a TOSA table at an event who are inquiring about what are you all doing here, right?
Right.
So I think that making sure that we customize our messages, they need to be consistent, but they should be customized for each type of individual or persona, avatar, stakeholder. I'm going to use all the communication like catchwords here, but so that each individual has that experience that meets them where they are. Casey, I love that. That's super helpful. Casey, I'll ask this to you since you are the professional communicator. What does smart talk mean to you?
So I thought a lot about this. So I wrote something down so I would say exactly what I thought. So to me, it's the intersection of clarity, authenticity, and purpose. It's about saying something not just eloquently, but in a way that kind of moves people and sparks connection, especially in emotionally complex work like ours. It's smart talk and also be compassionate talk and needs to be.
I love it. Wonderful definition. And I think it's exactly tailored for your viewpoint as a communicator these days. Wonderful job. So this has been a great conversation, super enlightening. It should be a thought starter for some people. And I want them to continue to engage with what you do there at TOSA. So what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you, Casey?
Best way is tosa1.org. That will connect you to a lot of information, and it will also give you the opportunity to connect to the Donate Life Texas registry where you can actually sign up to be a donor. Additionally, if anybody wants to talk to me on a professional comms level, I'm on LinkedIn under Casey Casseb.
And Joe, we know you're super busy. We'll just send them to the website so you can continue your important work.
Sure.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Joe and Casey, for sharing your knowledge with us and our listeners today.
Thank you,
you.
Melissa. Thanks for having us.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. We love covering communication topics that elevate our industry practice. If you'd like to go deeper, you can work with me as a coach, trainer, consultant, or hire my firm, MVW Communications, for strategic communication and public relations services. My industry books, Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know, and Latinas in Public Relations, Shaping Communications, Communities, and Culture, are also available for purchase on Amazon. Grab your copy there, and please leave us a supportive review. Book reviews and podcast reviews help more aspiring or hardworking pros find our resources. As always, think smart and communicate smart, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.